Okay. Hey, everybody, this is DHCP. If you're in the wrong room, welcome. All right, let's see. Here's the note well. If you haven't seen it this week yet, I hope you enjoyed sightseeing in Yokohama all week. Here it is again. Just a reminder, please keep your mask on, and when you're speaking, you're allowed to take them off. Please sign in if you're here on site. Click the little button on site tool that does the blue sheets for us so that we don't have to figure that out. Note taking. I did start the notes in the typical note taking doc. I know I talked to Tom Uck, but I don't see him here. Anyone want to take notes? I did talk to somebody about this beforehand, but he's not here right now. So
Is that why they're not here?
that's what I'm wondering. I'm very suspicious of said situation. We're not supposed to start until somebody. I've also remote people feel free to volunteer as well. I've seen that in several groups this week. That can be helpful as well. I have it open and we'll try my best to keep an eye on them as we go along. But since I'm solo today, I won't be able to actually do them. I know. Anybody? David, you're my hero. All right, we have a volunteer. All right, great. Moving on. Bernie's not here today. I'm Tim Winters. It's a little late for Bernie. Just probably got off the ski slopes a couple hours ago. Here's the agenda for today. Anyone have any qualms about this or anything else they want to talk about? Yep, take your time. I did drop in the agenda and all that stuff, so it's just fill in the dots underneath the presentation. All right, perfect. Okay, so here's the agenda. We have Lorenzo's going to talk about sub-registering self-generated IPv6 addresses. We're going to talk a little bit about distributed SRv6 locator that presented earlier this week in spring. And then we're going to talk about our favorite thing, trying to get 84.15 to an internet standard. Yep. Oh, right. Document standards. Okay, so here's what we got going on. We only have one working group document at the moment. I suspect we're going to have more after this meeting, would be my guess. I think we've got a couple candidates. So we're going to talk about all of the related stuff right now. I did throw a couple of extra related documents that are going through other working groups up here just so people know what's going on. The first one is added encrypted DNS. It's the radius update that's going through IESG review right now. We have my document on doing prefix delegation in the LAN. That's in V6 Ops and helping out. It's really used for SNAC. If you're interested in that, please go take a look. And then the last one is Lorenzo's draft about V6 and V6 Ops about PD to host. So those are all DHCP related things. They're not in this working group because they're not making DHCP protocol changes, but I figured this working group might want to see them and go check them out. Okay. Lorenzo, you're up.
Okay, you're going to present the slides?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm absolutely going to do that.
Okay, so this document is about registering self-generated IPv6 addresses using DHCP6. It's work with the co-authors below, at least, possibly one more. Next slide. So we presented this in in London, and we had a fair amount of feedback, and we sort of essentially, addressed the feedback. So we renamed the message. It used to be called add a red notification to add a reg inform. Inform is more consistent with the language we use in DHP-v4, so it's also an informational message. Right? In DHP-v4, it's called DHP inform, so we felt this was better. Next slide. Several folks at the meeting and on the list suggested that we needed an ACK in order to stop the client from retransmitting. We sort of were split on this because we thought that in general any new server is not going to be able to ACK this because it won't understand it. But we thought we decided to sort of follow the feedback and add an ACK, right? So the server can choose to acknowledge the message, and it must not sort of be considered any indication of whether the address is valid or not, because this is a one-way exchange. The client can't really so the only use of this ACK is for the client to say, okay, I'll stop retransmitting. And the client must stop retransmitting if it gets reply. And I assume, I don't know, maybe sort of question for them. I guess we don't need to say that the reply is identified by the transaction ID. That's sort of just basically I assume this is just standard DHP semantics. But okay, next slide. It was pointed out that the retransmit logic that we had was like homegrown and sort of like we rolled our own, and we sort of moved away from that, and we sort of actually re-implemented basically similar logic with the RFC 8514 behavior, which does, it kind of gives you ways to do exponential backups with various maximums. So so we basically say that it'll retransmit with exponential backoff, 1 second, 2 seconds, 4 seconds, jittered with a maximum, maximum retransmit count of 3. So you transmit at 1 to, you transmit t equals 0, t equals 1, t equals 3, and t equals 7, and that's it. And unless you get an ACK, and the client should allow these parameters to be configured. Next slide. And we added a way for the client to say that it can release its address. It does this by sending an inform message with all the lifetime set to 0. This is not generally super useful, but it's it was there for completeness, and I think servers can choose to forget about it. Although the purpose of this is mainly forensics, so you probably wouldn't delete it anyway. But anyway, so and next slide. And there are some things that we didn't do. There was some talk of having switches or routers sending these messages on the behalf of the client. It seemed kind of complicated. One of the things that the current draft says is that because the message comes from the IP address that is being registered, any sort of layer 2 snooping device can verify the correctness of the address because it will drop the packet if layer 2 security is in use. And so if you start doing spoofing, it becomes kind of complicated and erodes that guarantee. And also there was a request to do sort of, I forget, there was basically saying, well, we should use TCP for this because it's reliable and we can inform the server of multiple things. But that also seemed like a very big step away from standard DHCP, and we sort of didn't do that. We sort of just left it as standard DHCP6. Next slide. So with that, we do think that most of the feedback has been addressed, and we think this is ready to go forward. And the next step would be to hopefully issue an adoption call. And if there are any questions.
A couple people.
Yep.
Go ahead, Eric.
So Eric Vink, no head at all here. Just working for a router and switch vendor, as you can guess.
Yes.
So could the switch relay the message? I need to read the draft right in detail. Acting as a DHCP relay, right?
I don't see why not. Yeah, I mean, yes. I don't see why not. Yes.
And it spoof the message and relay it, self-generate it, right? I mean, I see, I have in my table, right, a mapping. I generate on my own a spoofed message. exactly like if the end station have done it, and then I relay it to the DHCP server. I need to think as well, right? But
Could you do it? Yes. Should we say that you can do it? I don't know.
that's a different story. I do agree.
Uh,
You say may.
David, did you want to
I
take
think
that?
it's really an interesting thing, right? So we got a database in the switch and the routers, or in the access point with all the mapping. It would be so cool to export them on the standard way, not over syslog.
I mean, maybe, yeah. I don't particularly oppose this. I find it ironic because one of the reasons we're doing this is that people hate syslog and they don't want to use it. And we've been trying to work with people to say, like, why don't you just use all of this information, these features that your switches already have? And they say, well, but we need it to be in DHCP6. But yeah, if you want to solve the opposite problem, I don't know what that would mean for this draft. Should we say may, or should we just leave it unspecified and then you can build your own proprietary feature? I don't actually know. Any comments from anyone? Why this is a bad idea or a good idea or terrible idea?
Actually, it's not a stupid idea, so that's fine. Anyway.
Yeah. Actually, for the spoofing, there's no way you can, actually mandatory people to stop that because man in the middle, you don't know who's there. So, but as standardization document, what we said, I would like to have that possibility here because, the relay agent here is actually spans the range of DHCP server could cover. So I would like at least leave it as may in our document.
So there are two issues that I've just thought of just now, which are number one, what if the client also does this? The DHCP server may log only the first time. If the client loses the race against the switch, the DHCP server will see that one instead. Well, you could argue it doesn't matter, but it actually does because the switch doesn't know what options the client would put in. For example, the FQDN. And so the FQDN is one of the things where actually we decided, we actually heard a real customer that wanted to do this. And they take the FQDN from DHCP4 and they stick it in DNS. And I'm like, well, that doesn't seem like a great idea, but that's what they do.
That's what they do. Yeah.
So that wouldn't, and the sort of the switch that spoofed this wouldn't really have any idea that if the client was going to later on do it. And so would have to be sorted out to add it. Yeah. So maybe,
There's someone ahead in the queue, but I'm responding to this. I'm not sure.
Go ahead, Dave.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was kind of going to raise the same comment. The way this normally is done is that the switches don't proactively generate stuff, which I guess some people may have been doing to try to address the problem because the client wasn't doing anything yet. But the way this would work when this is widely deployed is that the switch doesn't generate its own messages, but it rather just when the message is passed through, it adds something like option 82, whatever. Yeah. And that is a modification of the existing message from the client and not a new message that the switch generates. I do think the draft needs to say what exactly snooping switches, Savvy, whatever else are supposed to do with these messages, even if it is nothing. And especially, I think it's important to point out that the reply not only doesn't mean confirmation to the client, it also doesn't mean anything to the switch in regards to maintaining its snooping table for security purposes.
Mm-hmm. It's also quite unusual in the sense that it goes directly, if the reply would be unicast directly to the global address because the server doesn't know the link local address of and that is also quite unusual. That is one of the reasons why we didn't add a reply in the first place, but yeah. So, okay. That's it. So we'll add something that explains what what sort of like relay should do.
Yeah, relays and switches, right? Be
Yeah.
careful. Switches really, yeah. Okay.
I mean, this race can be sort of relatively easily fixed by just waiting a while. But maybe we should say, if you're going to spoof this, then you should wait for the client to see if it actually sends one.
Yeah, that'll get complicated.
Yeah. Maybe we should just leave as is and so not mention it. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I'm an Anggo Jaya. I like Telesis. Current version of the draft says that as soon as host obtain a new address, it should do this mechanism. I wonder if it might be useful for consideration section on implementation or operational consideration to have a flag to say whether host has to do it or it shouldn't do it. Just in the case where hosts are updated to implement this, but the server doesn't understand the messages at all.
So the draft already says that the DHCP server is required to drop messages that it doesn't understand.
Right.
And so,
Just preventing extra multicast packets unnecessarily to be
right,
sent
but
by
how would
host.
you tell the host not to do this?
Just by a flag,
A
administrative
flag where?
flag in implementation,
Oh, like in the host, you would want a
Yeah.
configuration option in the host to
That's
disable it.
either global or interface basis.
Okay. I mean, yeah. So basically,
It's
we
just
should have.
guidance for implementers.
Should be
or
configurable,
operators.
something like that.
Okay.
I can provide some text.
Okay. Yeah, that's something we can add, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it.
Thanks.
We'll do a call for adoption.
Thank you.
I think it's in pretty good shape. I think we can talk about this one.
Thanks.
All right, next is SRv6. Whoops.
So, hello everyone. Good afternoon. This is Wei Changcheng from China Mobile, and this draft have been presented for 2 times in last 2 IETF meeting, and it would like to introduce a new mechanism to distribute SRv6 locator by DHCP. So next page. The basic requirement is like the figure here. In telecom network, we may have a very large number CPEs. If we want to use SRv6 in those kind of application scenario, we should consider the wider geographical distribution, and there are also some application scenario the CPEs have not deployed IGP. So at this moment, we hope to use DHCP to distribute the locator so that we can simplify the configuration, and we can also dynamic learn the SRv6 locator subnets routine by the CPE automatically. So next page. So the proposal is very simple, and we just treat the SRv6 locator as a prefix. So the step listed here, the first step, DHCP server allocates SRv6 locator as a prefix, and the second, follow the DHCP prefix delegation process, and the third, after the locator prefix assigned, BNG dynamically distribute the locator subnets routine locally, and for distribute the locator subnet routine to the WAN network. And the last step, when the locator prefix released, the BNG should delete the locator subnet routine. So next page. And what we want to support the both SF6 original seed format and the compressed seed format. Next page. And the extension is very simple. According to the comments last meeting, we introduced a new identify association for SF6 locator. And next slide. And under that extension, we need to define IETF locator option. In this option, we will indicate the format of the locator, and we also will carry the SF6 locator in the option. And here we list how to express the locator, such as the locator length, the locator block length, and the function length, and the SF6 locate, and the argument length. So that for the both original SF6 locator and the comprised application scenario, which are both supported. Next page. So here is a basic encapsulation format. It's very simple. And next page. So it should work at two different scenarios. The first one is the BNG as a DHCP PD server. The process is very simple. Next page. And the second scenario, the BNG worked as a DHCP relay agent. It's also like the previous solution for prefix. Next page. And compiled to the last version, we update the draft, and currently the client can request multiple SF6 locator prefix by sending multiple IESF6 locator options. So it will be more efficiency. And in this IETF meeting, according to the suggestion from a working group, we also apply the slot in spring, and we also receive the positive feedback. The spring chairs consider this is useful for SF6 network. So next slide. So we think the solution is stable, and Spring guys also have reviewed the solution. It also follow the SF6 design principle. So we would like applying for the working group adoption. Any comments?
Any comments? Yeah, I mean, there isn't a whole lot of extra DHCP stuff here. So there are some options. I think almost all of it now, though, is we've gotten out of the document that was special to it. So I don't know if it should be a Spring. Maybe we can talk with the Spring chairs, where this document actually lives. Eric's getting up with some AD words.
Yeah, Eric Wing is the AD. Indeed, I think for simple, I don't want to diminish the value of your draft, right? But for DHC, it's just a simple option. it's typically done into the requesting working group. So you should request adoption by spring. Right? We will review with the working group last call stage. That's all we do for any DHC option. Right? So coming from a working group.
Yeah, that's traditionally how Eric's totally right. That's traditionally how we've done this, unless you're making protocol or other strange changes. And in this case, I think we got rid of all of them. So I think this might make sense. I think the original version had other things in it that have since been removed. So that's probably why we ended up where we ended up. I'll send an email to the spring chairs and see if we can figure out what makes the most sense. I'll CC you, Eric, too, and we'll figure that out. My question, I'm not in the queue, but have you actually deployed this or implemented this draft?
We plan to deploy that, and I think some of our partners, they are developing some function like this. I think it's very useful for us because when, as I just mentioned, it will simplify the configuration, especially for large CPE deployed applications.
Okay.
There. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, but you haven't actually. Have you done it like in a lab? Have you actually tried it? That was my real question.
Yeah,
Do you
we
have any
just
ready code?
done some lab test.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I think you're
Thank
you're
you.
off the hook. Thanks.
So last question.
Yeah.
What next step I should do?
Yeah, well, the next step is I'll send the email out and we'll figure out where this should land. I think it's just figuring out which working group it should belong to, and then we can go from there.
You will send the email.
Yeah, I'll send an email saying it was presented here. This was a working group document, but we think it should be in spring because that's traditionally how these options have worked. Yeah.
I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Let's see. Okay, so this is advancing DHCP v6 to an internet standard. This is one of the major things in one of our main objectives of this working group is actually trying to do this. So yeah, still there, still part of the charter. This is a quick reminder. I did slim this slide down, but these are the criteria for becoming a internet standard, just so everyone can quickly remember. And the big one we're going to talk about today is getting the number of implementations written down. Some of these other things don't apply to us. The IPR one, for example, number 4 doesn't apply to DHCP. We don't have any claimed on it. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this more in a second, but this is a slide you may have seen in the past. There's lots of implementations that exist in the world. One thing we're trying to be a little bit careful of here is there's a lot of 3315 implementations, slightly less number of 8415 implementations, but that's what we're trying to do is clean that up and figure out how we can easily distinguish which ones are doing the latest stuff and how many of them exist. I think the link shows up later. Okay. So this is our schedule, right? I got rid of all the stuff from previously. This is where we're at right now. It's been adopted. It's the one working group document we have. There is an update that's pending based on some IANA comments that we have. We just haven't released it yet because we were hoping to get other ones. It's pretty straightforward. It's just a minor update on the references page saying what to do. It's not a huge deal. It's the right thing. They figured that out. The one question I did have that if you could just get up to the mic now for this one, just so I won't wait for the end. We removed the use multicast status, but we also still have a lot of text about all the checks about what to do in all these scenarios. Should we go text hunting and try to remove all of that? Is people just okay? We asked this last IETF and didn't get any feedback, so this is otherwise it's just going to stay there. I don't know if that's going to confuse the heck out of people though, because there's checks in there to say, make sure it's not a use multicast status and what you should do. Lorenzo, go ahead.
It'll be very beneficial to anyone writing a new implementation.
All right. Okay, I think that's a great point. So we will go ahead and I think that's the feedback we'll take is anyone doing new implementations, that would be very helpful not to have to think about that at all, for sure.
And also, when we were doing this PD work, it took us a while to figure out that unicast actually wasn't a thing, and then it was going away, and it sort of actually made it possible to do some of the things that we thought, right? So because if unicast basically would have made the PD sort of stuff much harder to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason we took it out, right? Is because it's not that used, because it's not that useful. People basically don't want that or don't use that. So, okay. So I'm going to take that as we're going to remove that in the next rev of this document. We'll go through and go hunting for that text because it's confusing to people. This one's from Tomac. This is we're going to change the V2 to V3 update. The only other thing we're doing is we're aiming to get this out before 117 is our goal. You'll see some more on that later. I don't think we're hoping for more reviews, and I'll talk about that too, but that's kind of where we're aiming for. So we're trying to get this wrapped up in the very near future. We haven't had a whole lot of comments since we put it out in December, put it out for adoption. So we're hoping to get some stuff. One thing we do need to do is this. So a list of implementations. I know earlier slide I had some, I'll call them ancillary ones. We're actually looking for names and versions of people who have done 8415. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Alan.
Hey, Alan.
Can you add us to that list?
Yep, well, you can add yourself to it, but yes, I can add, what implementation?
It's free radius.
Mm-hmm.
We have, well, it's running in production, but it's not officially released.
Okay.
But it does work.
Okay. We're also going to go through the US Gov and Ready logo list too and add some stuff from there. Go ahead.
Okay, so Tomek Mrugalski, I see. So click on this link and it's editable for everyone. And Alan, I was looking at free radius. You should update your documentation. It doesn't mention V6.
Yes, it does not mention V6 because the officially supported version is V3, which does not do DHCP V6. The next release, which will come out perhaps one day if everything works, is working. It does support V6.
Okay.
It probably should be listed because it is running in production. The code is public. It is available. It's just
documentation
and other things haven't quite been finished yet.
Yep, every developer's nightmare. I hear you. Okay. Yeah, like we said, please add your implementation. We're going off of public listing here. We do not need, your blood. We don't need a blood sample when you send in your implementation if it supports 8415. If you claim it, we're going to believe you. Okay, so this is Bernie's plea. He gets really nervous when he doesn't think enough people have read the document. We'll even take people who read it, said it's fine, and that's all you write to the list. That would make him very happy. Bernie gets nervous that the silence makes him very nervous about a lot of this process. So please review the document, send comments to the list. So our next steps are pretty straightforward actually for this. We're going to post another version in May. We're going to resolve any outstanding comments, hopefully add this implementation status, and then aim to submit in June. There's a possibility we might put out one earlier if we get enough. Like we might take a rev to remove the use multicast checks, put that out now, just depending. But I think that's kind of our timeline going forward. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts about this? Yeah, I mean, this is what we've been working on. I'm glad to see there was no earth shattering or people running around scared. This is really, I think, the next couple steps. Please review the document and send comments on list. It would really help us get through this process. We already have a shepherd, so we're okay there. It's just really the implementation status. We're going to add it to the document and then remove it when it actually becomes an internet, when it goes through the process.
Everything I forget to put my name on the queue.
Sure.
I think one step before requesting publication by the ISG is the group last call.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. We'll put a version out in May that I was thinking that's what we'll do. We'll do last call at that point for it. Okay, I think that's everything. I don't have anything else. Does anyone have anything else they want to chat about? All right, then that concludes the DHCP meeting. Eric's getting up. Our AD's not done.
I need to justify my salary, right? Which is $0, of course, or €0, 0 yen. More seriously, you had a point about the future of the working group. So my intent would be to keep this working group dormant for a couple of years, so not meeting, keeping the list awake, but not closing it, because who knows. But I would really be interested in knowing the people's mind around this. Because closing it seems a little bit early.
Yeah, I mean, as we've seen, there's a lot of drafts up here that talk about DHCP things, and people might want to, as more deployments happen, if it becomes DHCP is in an odd state in that it's been around a long time, but I don't think it's seen a ton of deployments, and people might be coming up with creative ways. So I'm inclined to agree. Once we get this to internet standard, I don't think we definitely need to be meeting every meeting for sure, and we can put it in a dormant state, because I'm of the same opinion you are. I think closing it's probably a bit premature, but
the mic is open, right?
Yeah, mic's open. If anyone else has thoughts on this.
I mean, there were three drafts on the slides in the agenda, right? So there's that. I guess in some ways it's similar to 6man, which has basically, like in its charter, it basically says, well, we're around, and like anything that touches this stuff needs to come here, and we're sort of responsible for keeping an eye on things. And that was, I actually remember that was not that text was introduced, only a few years ago, right? And there was a discussion like, oh, should we close this? What should we do? And instead we said, okay, this is kind of a stewardship thing. Now there's a lot more arguments there than there are here. I think this is less controversial, but
Yeah, we also have the odd thing of a lot of working groups can do the work on their own. We have the options defined, and that's where DHC is in kind of like this weird. You can't get an RA option without going to 6man, and DH you can basically write your own option and get it through without us having to do anything. I think that's one of the interesting things about this working group is there's the protocol stuff, but just to get an option is pretty straightforward. So I think that's kind of what we're wrestling with here, but I think we should continue to talk about that, and definitely that'll probably be a primary discussion in the next IETF117 is figuring out what we want to do next. Yep. All right, open mic. Anyone have anything else? Any remote people? We good?
actually, question. Sorry, Lorenzo Cody. So our recently resurrected co-author for address notification, or soon to be resurrected co-author, pointed out a long time ago, we just missed it, that like the draft is experimental, but it feels like maybe it should not be experimental at this point. I don't know.
I meant to ask you about this.
Yeah.
If
it's an oversight, actually.
So, the experimental, I think part of it is that do you expect all implementations to do this? I mean, this is where this is going to get, I think originally it was thinking experimental because it was just, not every client was going to do it. So
is that the appropriate use of experiment? I mean, I don't really mind either way. It's not an appropriate use of experiment. Okay, RID is...
yeah. Go ahead.
RID is shaking his head. So, okay, so we need to figure out something else.
Yeah. I mean...
So, first, it's still not adopted. So, when you declare the call for adoption, please declare you want to be standard. And how many standards are not really deployed? Yeah. So,
right. Yeah.
So, for me, experimental would be a big mistake.
Okay. Should it say it's optional then? Should we say the message is optional?
Well,
every
RSC is optional, right? You don't need to.
Yeah.
I mean, how many hosts are not IPv6 enabled?
Yeah. Not everyone puts all their options in, right? I mean, you can take them or leave them, your favorite ones, right? Yeah, but that's definitely a good point. You should. I saw this and meant to ask you guys about that. I think experimental, you're almost scaring people away from using that unless you have a really good reason to use it. And it sounds like you guys want more people to adopt it than just you, so I would recommend standard. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? All right, I'm going to conclude. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for taking the minutes.
Well, that was my next question. And a question for you is like you're saying like what should we say? So like okay, I found another issue.
Thank you very much. Yes. So